Hello everyone, welcome to our canning conversation today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michelle Sagers. I am one of our naturalist educators at Stokes Nature Center. Today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about one of my favorite winter recreation activities, and that is snowshoeing, and another one of my favorite topics, which is history. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the history of snowshoeing. It's been involved in some military campaigns as well as obviously back to the Native Americans. We'll talk a little bit about that, as well as give you some tips to get started if you have never snowshoed before. It's a great, easy way to get out and slow down in the winter and get outside and enjoy the beauty of our winter ecosystems. It's really lovely, and we're very fortunate to have many trails nearby that it's really easy to get out and get snowshoeing. So let's get started. So first off, where did snowshoes first come from? So people, being very smart, we biomimicry, we mimicked the animals around us. So if you think of the snow-loving animals of winter that really thrive and are able to travel quickly, animals like the snowshoe hare and the lynx or reindeer, there's lots of examples. Usually they have very large feet. That those feet help disperse their body weight, help them to stay afloat over the snow without sinking so deeply, and to travel quicker. So when snowshoes first started back in Asia, as long as 6,000 years ago, they traveled over the Bering Strait to get to North America. Those peoples probably modeled them after these animals, and we do the same thing today with a lot of modern products. Actually, we use biomimicry and natural engineering to give us ideas to create new things. Other examples of that would be Velcro. That was inspired by the burdock plant, those burrs that stick to you and are really hard to get off, or stick to your dog if your dog runs through a patch of burdock. Glow sticks were inspired by bioluminescent animals like fireflies. And mussels, there's been adhesives that are used on boats, marine adhesives that have been inspired by mussels. So we use this all the time, and there's numerous examples of just amazing examples we've taken from nature and been able to engineer for our own use. And snowshoes is one of the earliest examples of that. So snowshoe beginnings, we think probably the very, very first snowshoes would have been a very crude board just strapped to the foot. So the picture I have there, somebody just had fun trying to create a modern snow ski, right? They've got some fancy kind of tennis shoe looking bindings on a board, but likely they just strapped a board to their foot, right? Probably not the most comfortable or best snowshoe, but it would have helped keep them afloat and travel quicker than just post-holing through the snow. If you've ever walked in deep snow without skis or snowshoe, you'll just post-hole in it and sink really quickly. So these would have traveled across the Bering Land Bridge from Asia as long as 6,000 years ago. Eventually, these would have morphed into all different sorts of styles of snowshoes, as we'll see, as well as to what we know as the modern ski. So one of our earliest archaeological examples of an early snowshoe came from the Italian Alps. It was made of birch and twine, so they just made a round frame out of that birch and strung twine and bound that to the foot or the shoe. This snowshoe was found near Otzi. It was a Neolithic iceman that was very well preserved, found in the Italian Alps. So you'll see the frame of that snowshoe is pretty well preserved. The webbing in between, not so much. Also, remnants of Otzi's clothes were found. Now, we don't know if the snowshoe actually came from Otzi. It might even be older than Otzi. It was found near him, but not necessarily was his. So we know that 6,000 years ago in the Italian Alps, people were using these. Now, it's a very harsh climate up there, and so there's modern history too that we'll talk about in World War II, where the snowshoes came in handy in that part of the world. So snowshoe designs. So from that crude board, snowshoes were perfected by Native Americans. A lot of the tribes around the Great Lakes and up into Canada really perfected different styles of snowshoe depending on the terrain that they were using those snowshoes in. So you have your very extremely long snowshoes. They call those Yukon or sometimes Alaskan snowshoes. However, if you think of a lot of parts of Alaska, it's pretty frozen permafrost and tundra. There's not a lot of deep snow to sink in, so they probably didn't use snowshoes in a lot of parts of Alaska that often. But up in the Yukon for sure, and into Canada, they would have used these. So these long ones are going to be great for large open areas with a really deep snowpack. The longer your snowshoe is, the higher you're going to stay on top of the snow, the less you're going to sink. Of course, if you have a 46-inch long snowshoe, you're not going to be able to turn very quickly or maneuver around trees or anything like that. So below that on the right is the bear paw snowshoe. These would have been favored by trappers and people traveling through dense forests. They're short, they're round, they're going to keep you up top of the snow better than just your own feet, but they're really going to be built for that added maneuverability to be able to turn and get around trees in tight forested areas. To the left of that picture we have the beaver tail. So this is what oftentimes I think people think of when you think of traditional Native American snowshoes, is this beaver tail design. So this kind of took the best of the Yukon and the bear paw snowshoes and combined them to give you more flexibility and maneuverability than you'd have with that Yukon, but also a little bit more length than you get with that bear paw to give you some of both. You're going to stay a little bit higher afloat than maybe on the bear paws and have some more maneuverability as well. So depending on what you're doing and what terrain you're on, you could pick any one of these snowshoes. And today there is numerous materials and things that snowshoes are made of. So most of these would have been made out of some kind of flexible wood, birch or willow. They can bend to form that frame. And then they take twine from plants or rawhide from animals to be able to make that webbing and just strap to their feet. People do still make these today. Oftentimes it can be pretty involved and make a steam box, right, to steam that wood and get it nice and flexible and bend it to that shape you want. So a lot of work and a lot of time involved in making these, but certainly a necessity for Native Americans back in the 1600s through 1800s and even earlier. They needed these to be able to travel, to be able to hunt. If they traded, they really needed these to get around. It was a necessity. It wasn't something they could choose to do for fun like we do today. So when Europeans arrived, a lot of the trappers and traders rather quickly adopted snowshoes after watching the Native Americans and the benefits of them. So some of the early explorers, Jacques Cartier and Samuel de Champlain, noticed them and used them. The first actual written record we have was from a Franciscan priest in the 1500s. Not all Europeans were as quick to adopt snowshoes to their detriment. So, and that was some of the British during the French and Indian War. They did not take on snowshoes very quickly, didn't come around to that idea, and it led to several defeats. And then they finally got the hint, took snowshoes up, but for one well-known battle that didn't help them any. So Captain Roger led about 180 British Rangers on a reconnaissance mission through about 4 feet of snow. They were ambushed and greatly outnumbered by a much larger company of French who were also all on snowshoes. But this has become dubbed the Battle on Snowshoes, become famous for one of the few battles that early on in military history that was fought entirely on snowshoes. So this took place near Lake George. There's actually a very long history of snowshoes in military campaigns. Another very well-known example is the 10th Mountain Division. These guys were formed in 1943, shortly before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. They were formed as a very specialized mountain warfare unit to fight in mountain and Arctic conditions, and they went through some grueling training based out of Camp Hill in Colorado. It's still an active unit today. They've deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq. In fact, they've been one of the most deployed divisions since 2001. But they got their start in World War II. They actually were recruited, the U.S. Ski Patrol was a recruitment agency, and to this day they are the only civilian agency who's recruited for the military. A lot of the guys recruited for the 10th Mountain were outdoorsmen who skied and spent a lot of time in the mountains. So these guys use snowshoes as well as skis. You can see this is a picture of them with some snowshoes. They trained in areas like Mount Rainier in those pretty harsh conditions. And they took them quite a while to be deployed, actually. They were formed with the idea that if we were attacked in World War II up in New England, that we would need specialized mountain troops to keep the high ground and to be able to fight those battles. Well, as we know, in World War II, that didn't happen. These guys, however, did flight on one of the Aleutian Islands, and then they saw some of the roughest terrain in Italy during World War II. So they were deployed for about 114 days during the war. 992 from the 10th Mountain were killed in action. Over 4,000 were injured. To fill out these troops, there also was National Guardsmen recruited from some of the surrounding states, including Utah. So we do have some Utah ties to the 10th Mountain Division. So very specialized even to today for that mountain warfare. And really fascinating history. There's some great documentaries that you can find on Amazon if you're interested in learning more about these guys and about what they did over in the Italian Alps during World War II. So going from using snowshoes as a necessity just to survive or as a necessity for warfare, today snowshoeing is used for recreation. But recreational snowshoeing actually started earlier than I thought it might have. Started as early as the late 18th century up in Quebec, where they began holding long distance races, as well as shorter sprinting races, and some even had hurdles, which I can't imagine trying to do hurdles in snowshoes with a big snowshoe dragging behind you, but they did it. It grew into actually a very, very serious sport, especially in French Canada, which is where snowshoes were perfected. So there was a pretty intense rivalry between Native Americans and European contestants in these races. And snowshoe makers began working even harder to perfect snowshoes to make them lighter weight, narrower, easier to race on. To the point that the Montreal Snowshoe Club had to set a weight limit on your snowshoes, that they had to weigh a minimum of 1.5 pounds in 1871. If they were lighter than that, you were disqualified and you couldn't race because those snowshoe engineers had got so good at building lightweight snowshoes. Today, we still have competitive snowshoe racing. So the United States Snowshoe Association would be the United States version of this, but there are organizations and associations all over the world that participate in snowshoe racing. And there's national competitions worldwide. The women's 2018 champion competed in, I believe it's Argentina. She actually grew up in Wellsville, Utah, so some Cache Valley ties. But they do full-on marathons, everything from 5Ks on snowshoes to marathons. Conditions obviously vary a lot geographically depending on where the course is, as well as the weather. So we'll talk a little bit. Snowshoe racing shoes are quite different from what you and I probably will use, unless you want to be a snowshoe racer. They're a lot lighter weight, narrower, so you can have more of a natural running gait, whereas other snowshoes, you walk pretty naturally, but your hips are going to be a little bit wider. It's not very comfortable to run in. And as you can see, they wear pretty typical running gear and running shoes with those snow racing shoes. So the bindings are going to be built for more of your typical running shoes rather than boots. They do usually have the Big Fit Snowshoe Festival in Midway, Utah, if you're interested in observing some snowshoe racing. So if snowshoeing for you, if you're a hiker, but maybe just don't get out in winter as often as you'd like, you betcha snowshoeing is for you. There's many super easy trails around here to get started. So start with some easy flat terrain and you can work your way up. If you know someone who already likes to snowshoe, go with them before going out on your own. And you can rent snowshoes from us or several other places in the valley. Of course, you want to make sure you always have your safety gear with you, avalanche gear, flashlights, first aid kits, food and water just to be safe. Check that avalanche forecast before you go. This year, we have a pretty persistent weak layer of snow, so I would stick to the flatter areas snowshoeing. But there's still some great trails that are flatter out of those avalanche hazards like Bunch Fast Trail, Sink Hollow, a lot of different options for you. So we have rentals available at Stokes Nature Center. You just need to go to logannature.org/snowshoe rentals. You can reserve those and arrange a time to pick them up at our Providence office, which is at 2 North Main, just across from the library. They're $5 a day or $15 for the weekend. So weekends, you pick them up on Friday, return them on Monday. We're not there on Saturday and Sundays. So if you want to go out over the weekend, you want to make sure and get those from us on Friday. All right, let's look at, I have a couple different snowshoes here. So I'll show you these MSR ones. This is what we rent at Stokes. Now, we have some great groom trails, and this year we don't have a great snowpack. The snow's not that deep. So you're probably not going to need very long snowshoes. The length of your snowshoe is going to depend on the trail. Like I said, if it's groomed, you don't need it very long. Most people aren't going to need longer than a 23-inch snowshoe on our trails out here. The great thing about these guys, if you are more of an avid snowshoer getting out in the backcountry in some deeper snow, it's got this tail that you can attach, and voila, you've got a longer snowshoe. So you might attach that maybe if you're going overnight with more gear, so more weights. Right, the more weight you have, the longer snowshoe you need. So these bindings, they can take a little bit of time to get them on correctly, but they work really well once they're on. And these are pretty grippy. They've got these tracks along both sides, as well as that crampon. So you've got some great grip on these guys. So these are more kind of a recreational slash. You could take these into some parts of the backcountry for sure. And that's what you can rent with us. So they're made out of plastic decking. Other features though to consider are you can get into different binding types. So this is my snowshoes here. These bindings are a little bit easier to get on. They just clip and tighten a lot easier than trying to get those pegs done up. You also, if you're thinking you want to get into it and do maybe some more uphill, get into some more hills, you can look for this feature right here. So this is a kickstand, and you can put that up behind your heel to give your calves a break when you're traveling uphill. You can go uphill without a kickstand. You're going to be up on your toes, toeing in on those hills, and so you'll get definitely a calf workout. So this is just to help relax that calf, that kickstand right here. Other things to look at are just the materials and the aggressiveness of your crampon. So if you're just light recreational on some of our groomed trails and things, you don't need an expensive snowshoe at all. A pretty inexpensive recreational snowshoe will get you by. The more aggressive these crampons are, the more harsher terrain you're going to be able to take these guys on. Other things to consider are just, this one's got kind of the aluminum framing versus the plastic decking. They both work fine. These ones have more of the lighter weight paneling instead of that plastic, but they work equally as well. Just depends on what you like. And you could try out a few styles of snowshoes and figure out what it is that you like. So there are size charts out there to help you select. I would, if you decide to purchase them, look at the manufacturer's brand. If you're renting them from us, we'll help you figure out what size you need. We have snowshoes that range from 21 to 23 inches. So most adults, 22 inches is probably just fine if you're out, like I said, on those groomed trails. Places to go, we usually have tons of options of places to go. Not quite as many this year because we haven't had as much snow. The river trail at Stokes is a good easy one to get started. It's not great right now though, kind of icy, not great snowpack there. I would recommend this year trying either Green Canyon, Bunch Grass, or Sink Hollow. They're all really easy. I've listed moderate here, so if you're doing the whole way, yeah, they can be a little bit harder, but any of these, just go as long as you want and turn around and have fun while you're out there. They're all safe, great areas to go snowshoe in. And if you're looking for other trails to try out, just contact us. You can call us, email us. We're more than happy to get you some trail recommendations. We're very lucky to have a lot of places here in the Cache National Forest to go. So there's a couple resources if you're looking at choosing snowshoes, or if you want to experiment and make your own. That's kind of a really fun article on how to make them if you're crafty. Thank you for joining me today for our canyon conversations. We also have snowshoe programs still open, so that's another great way to get out and experience snowshoeing if you're not ready to strike out on your own. Maybe you don't know anyone to go with that snowshoes. Look under our community programs, link on our website at logannature.org. We've got Moonlight Snowshoe and our Sweetheart Snowshoe coming up. And you can also sign up for a social bubble snowshoe with us. So that's a program we've designed specifically with COVID in mind, where you can sign a group of 7 to 10 people up that is in your social bubble, so to speak, and we'll take you out on a snowshoe trip on a trail that meets your level and your choice and provide you the rental snowshoes. So that's only $15 per person if you're interested in that program. Thanks for joining us, guys. We will have another canyon conversation posted in 2 weeks here on YouTube. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.